So I got home this week on Friday afternoon. As I was getting off the plane, not even off the plane, like as soon as the reception kicked in, my phone rang. I got a phone call. And it said, Edmonton Public School Board. So this could be one of any three people in my family. But it was Edmonton Public School Board, a specific school. So I said, I better pick this up. If you guys have been around Bishop, you'll know that he has a really hard time not talking smack. I asked him permission if I could share this. He said, yeah. You know, he's got a problem. This isn't the first phone call I've had. This isn't the second phone call I've had. This is the third phone call in 2 months. With different people. So as you can see, it's not going away. It's escalating. The first time it happened, first, non-disclosure. I remember the first time my dad got that phone call, and it wasn't fun for me. So when I first got that call, I just decided to have a conversation with Bishop. Hey, Soph, can you cue my thing while I do this? The second time, you can sing. The second time I got a phone call, I was like, okay, whatever I did last time is not working. We're going to have to adjust. And so we talked about it, and what we agreed on was no video games. I thought that would be close to his heart. But then I get this third phone call. And Bishop knows that if this keeps escalating, unfortunately, my parental methods have to escalate. And so if you're Filipino, you know what I'm saying. So we tried all these different things. It wasn't working, and I felt so bad when I got home. I was like, I think on Thursday I looked over at Pastor James. Not that Pastor James isn't cool, but I looked over at him and I was like, I kind of just want to go home. I'm tired. I miss my family. And as I was on this plane ride home, I was thinking about all the cool things we would do together. Whoa, this is like foreign. I was thinking about all the movies we'd watch, taking them out for supper, all these different things, and all that was changed when I got this phone call. And so now I was like, what do I do? We have an agreement, we have an understanding that he knows what's going to happen. And it happened. And so I was even telling James, I was like, I don't know. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do this thing I don't want to do. If I don't do it, then I go back on my word and, we got to restart from the beginning. So many different things. But as we think of Father's Day, I was challenged to how do I discipline graciously? This morning, I asked my kids, what are some characteristics of fathers? Well, I didn't follow Bishop, so he said loving. Oh, Sophie, sorry. He said funny. Sophie said loving. And I said, okay, well, what's something different between mommy and daddy? And it's probably our household. And the kids were like, Bishop said, athletic. And Sophie said something sporty, maybe 15 years ago. But for most of our fathers, when we look at them, when we talk about them, we think about strength. Strength to pick up our children, to play with them, to wrestle them, to do all these different physical things, maybe. There's the strength. I know many fathers who work many jobs, work endless hours. There's the strength to provide and to sacrifice their own pursuits in order to do that. In the Bible, we read that a father's responsibility is for the faith and spiritual direction of their household. That their strength is in direct relation to the faith of their household. So what they do has great ramifications, not just for them, but for their children, and for their children's children, and their children's children, and so on and so forth. So the responsibilities of a father, this strength, if you will, is not just for them, but to a larger community. In James 2, we read about faith, and we learn that faith requires action. To paraphrase, it is a belief demonstrated. It is a thought or an idea put into action. This is what faith is. In Hebrews 11, that's what we have up here. It says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen is not made out of the things that are visible. And so faith requires action, but faith is also the assurance of things that are not seen. What does more faith, what does a strengthening faith, what does a growing faith look like? Is it simply more action? You know, some of us are thinking or thought of already Father's Day gifts. I remember my dad always wants a new phone, but he doesn't know how to use it. So you have to always set it up. And it's like, you know, when you like set up a new technology for the very first time, you're putting everything, you're plugging it in, you're following directions, and you have faith that it's going to work. Does that make sense? It's like, if I follow these instructions, it's going to do all the things that I envisioned it's going to do according to the manual. So you go about, you do these things. In that sense, does a growing faith or a strengthening faith, does that mean just doing that same process over and over and over and over and over again? Well, not necessarily. Again, faith is not just works. Faith is works in that which is not seen. So that means growing in faith means not just growing in action, in activity, but growing in the pursuit of that which is not seen. So the action has to correspond. It's not just activity. Faith needs to not only grow in quantity, but quality. So now we ask, what are the markers? What are the measurements? What are the things we use to quantify that which is not seen, that which is not quantifiable, that which is, for all intents and purposes, intangible? For instance, you know, a child can say to their parent, I love you this much. What does that mean? Perhaps a more specific measure is how. How do we love them? What are the things we do to demonstrate that love? If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to Genesis 22. And we're asking today, how do we measure that which is not seen according to faith? Starting in verses 1 to 4, or 1 to 18. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham, he rose early in the morning, he saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose, and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it out on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. And again, Abraham says, Here I am, my son. He says, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham says, God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. And so they went, both of them together. Verse 9. When they came to the place of which God had told them, Abraham built the altar there. He laid the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son, and he laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out of his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And again he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his thorns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord Will Provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord, it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. And I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars in heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall be all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. This is loud. So, what are the markers? What are these things we can identify as faith that is being strengthened? What are the markers of a strengthening faith? Well, quite simply, there's three here that we find. There's availability, there's obedience, and there's worship. Those three things together allow faith to move forward. In verse 1, and repeated throughout, there's the availability. Availability is a willingness to stop everything to be present. And how do we measure this? How do we see this? Abraham repeatedly, Here I am, here I am, here I am. When was the last time God called you by name? Was it this week? Was it this month? Can you ever recall a time that God called you by name? You see, God called Abraham at this point by name, and Abraham didn't simply say, just a second. He didn't, contemplate all the things that he was doing. And he didn't say, Are you serious right now? He didn't say, What do you want to know? What do you want with me? He didn't say, I'm busy. His response was simple and measurable. God called, and he identified his availability by saying, Here I am. I'm here. I'm present. I'm available to you. So what are the things we're communicating when we say, just a second, or I'm busy, or I'll get back to you? My dad, when he would call, I wouldn't even say I'm busy. I would actually wait like 4 or 5 times before I heard my name until I said, just a second. I don't think I can remember a time where I was just like, yes, here I am. And what are we communicating when we do that? Intended or not, we're saying, I'm not available right now. We're saying that what I'm doing currently is more important than you. What I'm doing right now is too important for me that I can't stop. What I'm doing right now is so important that talking to you would distract me from my current goals. Now I ask, do any of these encourage the person calling us to talk to us more? Then why are we surprised when we are challenged to hear God? So are we growing in availability? Are you growing in your availability? How readily are you responding, here I am? A strengthening faith is identifiable by your availability. The second thing is obedience. Obedience is a willingness to proceed as instructed. Here's the rub: without protest. Listen to this ask. God to Abraham, take your son, he knows how important he is, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. Verse 3, look what happens next. So Abraham rose early in the morning. He saddled his donkey, he took his young men with him, he took Isaac, he cut the wood, burnt offering. He arose and went to the place of which God had told him. And I want you to bear in mind this son whom he loved. Abraham is 100 years old when he has Isaac. He waited 100 years. He waited 25 years since the promise of Isaac. All this to say that Isaac's value to Abraham is something that, I haven't waited 100 years for anything. I can't even properly understand or empathize with that. But all this to say, Isaac was incredibly valuable to Abraham. And yet Abraham doesn't second guess. He doesn't protest. This was a man who had bargained with God to save others. If you read further back in Sodom and Gomorrah, this was a guy whose relationship with God was one where he could go to him and he could protest. Yet when it came to himself, when it came to what God asked of him, nothing. He simply obeyed. So today, what are the things God has asked you to do? Maybe he's asked you to call somebody. Maybe he's asked you to, pick up the phone, call your father. Maybe he's asked you to invite someone for a meal. Maybe he's asked you something a little bit more. Maybe he's asked you to give up social media. Maybe he's asked you to, stop an unhealthy activity. And how many times do we protest? How many times have we delayed? How many times have we bargained with God over these things? And if we can bargain with God over these things, how much more would we protest if God asked for something as valuable as Isaac was to Abraham? Friends, a strengthening faith is identifiable by our obedience. Are we obedient to what God is asking us to do? The last thing, and they all work together, availability, obedience. The last one is worship. And this is simply a desire to give God that which belongs to him. When we're thinking of Father's Day, I stopped by just full disclosure again, I stopped by my dad gifts a long time ago. We'd go for a meal, and whatever I put so much thought and effort into, I would find it after we left the restaurant, in the restaurant. And she's like, why am I buying things? Why am I going through all this trouble? And so I began to, instead of thinking, what does my dad enjoy? What would my dad deserve? I just began asking, well, what am I going to enjoy giving him? I'm going to stick to those things. I'm going to stick to things that I want to give. There's nothing wrong with that. We all look for gifts that we enjoy giving. We want to see the look on someone's face. Hopefully, that's what we're thinking of. So what do we enjoy giving God? What are the things in your life that you're giving? When we think of worship, one of our ongoing discussions is worship is not just singing on Sunday. Is your worship in what you're doing during the week? Are you worshiping in your workplace? Are you worshiping as you serve your community? How are you worshiping? And what you are giving, what you are offering God, are you giving him what you enjoy giving, or are you giving what he deserves? As Abraham's faith grew, so did his offering. He offered to God that which God deserved. Therefore, he could not, in good conscience, withhold anything, not even his promised son. He desired to give God that which belonged to God. He was available, he was obedient, he desired to worship above everything else. And the reward of this faith was not something, because he had already received Isaac. The reward of faith was this ability to have true, unreserved worship, to give for God completely what was asked. A strengthening faith is identifiable by your worship. Are you able to worship because of who God is? What are those things that you're offering? When we look at this story, we think of the cost. The cost was not simply Isaac. There was the time spent on this journey. If you look at it, since the ask, 3 days. And then on top of that, it was the value of this sacrifice, that which was immeasurable for Abraham. And I ask you here, as we think about the cost for us in regard to our worship, is what we offer in worship something that is primary to us, something that is so important to us? Or is what we offer God something that's secondary? Is it our leftover? Is it just the things that, I could do with a little bit of this. I got this to spare. A strengthening faith is identifiable by your worship. See, a strengthening faith is one where action moves forward towards God, although unseen. This strengthening faith progresses in both quantity and quality. These are identified by availability, again, obedience, and worship. When we got back this morning, I found Bishop in the living room, and he was watching Star Wars, the original Star Wars. And I know they want to watch the new Obi-Wan. Before we left, we watched Top Gun together. If you think of all the different little media or movies out at this time of year, for some reason they're all sequels, at least the ones I can think of. There's Lightyear, Jurassic Park, Doctor Strange. Everything's a sequel. So when we think of these, why do we watch sequels? Why are they interesting to us? Does anyone here watch a sequel to see the same stuff as the first one? Now, who signs up, spends $20 to go watch a movie with the same challenges, the same action sequences, the same conflict? Many of us, when we go to these things and we're excited about them, we expect an increasing scale. Does that make sense? So, for instance, we watched Star Wars this morning, If you watched a new Star Wars and then watch the original Star Wars where everything is like paper mache and stick figures, I presume, you'd be like grossly disappointed. I think I was. But when we think of these things, when we think of something that gets us excited, that we want to consume, we want bigger dinosaurs, we want faster vehicles, we want bigger things, better explosions. We want this increase in magnitude. Does that make sense? Well, the same is true with what we offer God. What are you offering God today? Is it the same as it was last week, last month? Is what you're offering God today the same as it was pre-COVID? If it is, has it grown? Has it strengthened? For Abraham, you see this growth from demonstrations of adorations. You see, as God calls him out of his place, he starts to build these altars, and it's a practice that we have up until this story in Genesis 22. He builds altars out of adoration to God. In chapter 17, he doesn't just stop at altars. He offers God something that's personal to him, and this is his foreskin. And then on top of that, it doesn't just stop there. Some people be like, foreskin, I'm out. Some people are laughing, but this is right in the Bible. Okay? Foreskin, I'm good. That's the max. That's the max I can go. It's not the max. He offers Isaac. You see, Abraham's offering grew as his faith grew. They go together. You cannot have a growing offering without an increasing faith. Likewise, it is impossible to have a dynamic faith that grows with a static offering. And some of you are like, easy for Abraham. That's hard. I want you to take a little note here. When I was reading through the context, this was particularly interesting to me. One of the things we noted was Abraham was available. So God says something, he's like, here I am, let's go do it. He builds these altars. On one occasion, the Lord comes down, he sees him, and Abraham, it says he runs to him. He runs to him. And very quickly he's like, Lord, let me feed you. And he runs back. He doesn't stop running. He's moving quickly. He's got pace. And he instructs his family, his household, to also act with pace. Let's prepare the bread. Let's prepare the water. Let's move quickly. Let's go do it. So when he sees God, when he has something to offer God, he moves quickly. Okay? Even the foreskin, I found really interesting. This guy's 99. 99. God's like, let's seal the deal of this covenant. Give me your foreskin. Give me your foreskin. And not just yours, but everybody in your household. Think about this. When I had to get Bishop circumcised, I had to look it up. I had to look for where to go. There was a process involved. This is how quick Abraham is. That very day, he's like, let's go. We've got cleavers. Line everybody up. Let's start cutting away. Right? The point is, he's quick. God says something. It's an opportunity to give something to God. He's quick. And I don't say this laughingly, but he's quicker than I ever would be. And yet, look at here, in 22, the ask. And if you just look at it by itself, it just seems like he's moving. God asks him, what does Abraham do? Does he do it? Does he run? Does he do it that day? For the first time in the recorded scripture, for Abraham, he goes, God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to go the next day. And then on top of that, he journeys and he takes his time again. It takes 3 days before he's in the place to sacrifice Isaac. So all this to say is that giving sacrifice, giving to God what he has. And if anything we learn from Abraham, it's not that it's easy, it's hard. It's really hard. The thing that Abraham wanted most, the thing that was promised him, it was hard for him. He dragged his feet. And yet it's not how slow we move. Faith is how we move forward. And going back to Hebrews 11, it continues on specifically about Abraham. It says, by faith, Abraham obeyed what he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. He went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Further on, it says in verse 17, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. He who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son whom he waited for, of whom it was said through Isaac, shall your offspring be named. Abraham considered that God was able, this is how well he knew God now, after his faith grew. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. See, before Abraham had given to God in pursuit of this promise, like many people, past, present, and future, he had given to God in exchange for a future. And here he gave to God, the importance being that an offering was happening. The priority was that he gave. Now, having received the promise, in exchange for what? As he grew, as his faith grew, what was important to Abraham was not the offering, but who it was for. It was for God. And his faith propelled him forward. It was a growing faith strengthened by an offering increasingly not just to God, but for God and for God alone. See the subtle difference? When we think of fathers, we think of their fatherly strength in so many different ways. But when it comes to Scripture, it is the strength to act in faith. It is the strength to choose God and God's ways above all else on behalf of your family. As both his faith and his offering grew, so did his expectations of God. He was able to act in great faith because what he knew of God was great. What was important was not, again, the promise from God, but giving for God to do what he pleased, because he knew, and what he knew of God and how he knew God grew. The practice of child sacrifice in the ancient Near East was prevalent. This wouldn't be, as we read this today, like, ooh, God's weird. Well, this would have been a common practice for the people of that time. It would have been a common practice to offer up a blood or human sacrifice, a child sacrifice, in order to receive something in return, in order to receive rain, in order to receive fertility, in order to receive some sort of prosperity or something that the person giving wanted. See, God asked for Isaac not because he was like these gods, but he asked for Isaac to demonstrate that he was different. And while he deserves it all, and he tests those, we read here, he tests those that say that they love him, he wants them to know that he loves them more than what they know is even possible. That's the test. And so today, is your faith growing? How has it grown? Are you more available? Are you increasingly obedient? Are you in a place where you just desire to worship? When these grow, we begin to move from a place of giving to God to a place of offering for God, where the subject is not what we give, but the subject is God alone. It's not what we offer, but who we are giving our offering to that has the most importance. As we close here, faith is measured by what we offer for God, not simply what we're offering to God. As we close, all of us, as we sit here today, even as we gather to worship, all of us are holding on to something. This could be work. This could be a relationship. If you're a parent, this could even be the relationship with your children. It could be your children. It could be a hobby. It could be an activity. It could be a goal or a pursuit in life. All of us are holding on to something. So I ask you, what are you holding on to? What is that for you as you sit here? You could be holding on to security. You could even be holding on to anxiety. And as you're holding on to that thing, as you assess what that is, I ask you, how has your faith grown because of your reluctance to give it to God? And what could happen with your faith starting today? If this afternoon you gave for God to use that which you cherished most. For Abraham, when they came to the place of which God had told him, he built the altar there, he laid the wood, he bound his son, he laid him on the altar. Abraham was ready. He was ready to do it. He had taken 3 days, but he was there. And in that moment of truly being able to offer his son, the angel of the Lord came to him. He called him by name. And he responded, "Here I am." Don't lay a hand on the boy. Don't do anything. And then there was a ram. There was a suitable offering, just as he had hoped for. The Lord provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven, and he said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this, and you have not withheld, I will surely bless you. And I will not only bless you, I will surely multiply your offspring, as the promise entailed. The stars of heaven, the sand that is on the seashore, your offspring. Your offspring of all the nations of the earth will be blessed because you obeyed my voice. So what are those things for you today? How would the nations be blessed if we simply offered what God was asking us? In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, it says. For the children have a refuge. What does offering that thing look like us today? And will you?